permission to speak. Shadows hide you. I am listening. Our paths converge.
So good to see you.
Hail to you. Never lose hope.
Here, Fred Shaft.
I hear you. It has only begun. Fight on, Fred!
Welcome to episode 443 of Concede, a Hearthstone podcast dedicated to making the competitive side of the game more accessible to you. It is Thursday, April 18th, 2024 in the evening. Coming to you from Nomergan, Ohio, it's me, Edelweiss. From North Rend, Massachusetts, we have Wicked Good.
Hi.
From Teldrassil, California, we have Magesa.
Hello.
And from all around the world, we have you, dear listeners. As always, thank you for your reviews. If you would like to support the show but cannot do so monetarily, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast feed of choice, as it always helps other people find the show. So, Life and Ladder. I had been doing pretty well with various things, and then decided to try other decks and start to fall. I do not understand today's Decksplanations, so hopefully that'll be enlightening for me, because that deck did not work out, among others. I mean, some of it was just like bad Q luck. Like I would Q Pain Lock and hit Nature Shaman, or something like that, or not even Nature Shaman. I think it was I hit a Hunter, right? One of the decks that's just like, oh, you hurt yourself? Okay. And eventually I was just like, well, I'm going to go back to my comfort, which is Blood Decay. And that was going great up until I encountered a bug that fortunately is fixed now, where if I don't know what the conditions were, because it never worked for me, but people would be getting Staff of the Animus, and it would freeze you.
Oh yeah, if you play Quartzite Crusher first, then it would do that. That just got fixed.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yes,
because I lost to that this morning, and it was unpleasant. Let me tell you, I was just like, I just want to swing with this weapon that's going to give me a 16 armor, and I can't do it because I'm getting frozen for 4 turns that I shouldn't be. It was pretty rough. And yeah, I didn't make use of it myself because, no Quartzite Crushers in my full Blood Decay.
I mean, not on purpose. You can get them, just not on purpose.
Yeah, you can get them, but yeah. I did win a bad matchup, though, against Warrior, which was kind of hilarious because, sometimes they don't have the brand right away, and you can, either discover Helia from the Titan, or just get lucky on what they hit with the TNT, and my Shuffle Ziliax made it. So I ran them out of stuff.
Sometimes you just need one to dodge. You just need to be like Neo in the Matrix sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, there were other factors as well, but it is hilarious to run a brand warrior out of stuff. I don't think that's how they expect to lose ever.
No.
And yeah,
not unless it's the mirror. Sometimes in the mirror you expect to lose that way,
but that's because you're getting TNT'd
otherwise.
back. Although that is another option, right? If I Tony when they've got 6 TNTs in their deck, then I've got 6 TNTs in my deck. It's another option. But otherwise, Rainbow Mage has probably been the most consistent thing, because it has, even-ish matchups all around. There's far fewer Demon Hunters now, because people just aren't going to try it with the nerf, I guess. And, of course, it's a very balanced meta, which means I don't know what to do. If I'm not hunting something, like, I sometimes end up at a loss. I think I played Wheel Lock for a bit, and of course I wasn't finding warriors when I was playing Wheel Lock. It was just a lot of that kind of stuff. So I did finally, and I will say, testament to this expansion, it has not been until this week that I started playing other games again. So for a good long while, it was basically just like I'm playing Hearthstone in my free time, and so it was only recently that I started, picking up Baldur's Gate 3 or Final Fantasy again.
No, that's pretty high praise because those are very tempting, addictive games.
They are. Yes.
Yeah. My daughter found Final Fantasy Rebirth at the library. She's like, "Do you want me to bring it home?" Like, I don't think I have time right now. Like, maybe in a little bit, but I don't have time right now for that. I got too much going on. I have horses to chase on my motorcycle. I can't play Final Fantasy. But yeah, I have been playing some other games too. I got the itch to draft in Magic again, so I bought the play bundle and I got the little Tiny Bones pet, who was adorable. He's a little skeleton who flips coins, and you tap on him and he takes his hand off of his skeleton and then swings a key around on his finger and then puts it back. He's adorable. But I'm apparently only allowed to draft white green because that's all it's given me. I've done 2 drafts and I've just both times just gotten like the white green multicolored like right away. I'm like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. At least I know how to do this. So I did get 6 wins with the last run, 6 out of 7 wins. So that was enough to fund a whole other run. So, I'm enjoying it as a change of pace.
So this is drafting against bots or drafting against people?
No, it's only drafting because it's a new set. It's only drafting against people. They don't open.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, they don't open the quick draft up for like 2 weeks until like 2 weeks after the set goes live.
Oh, cool.
So I bought the $25 thing that has like 1 sealed token, which went terribly. Just absolutely brutal losses, like 0-3, very quick. And then 2 draft tokens, and then I try to milk the drafts enough to get enough gems to do more drafts and just keep that going until I run out. But I've got at least enough for 2 more drafts after the 2 draft tokens, so that'll keep me out of trouble for a little while. I did finally learn the Zarimi Priest on stream Monday night. Magesa was gonna join me, and then things didn't work out, and I said, well, I'm just gonna try it anyway because I am capable of this. I'm good enough. I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me, and I'm gonna figure this thing out. And I mean, I did end up going. I ended up like Frankensteining a list together. And Magesa, you said you landed on the same list like independently.
Yes, the exact same list. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I took like some of the things from Habugabu's list and some of the things from the standard list, and like I wanted to keep the gyre worms in because I like the idea of the gyre worms, but I wasn't playing Razor Scale because I'm not Habugabu in a Masters Tour playing against all nature shamans. Like I knew that wasn't going to be it. So I put back some of the things that he had taken out. I did have a Leroy in there where he didn't. That came in handy occasionally, not as often as I would have thought, but it did come in handy occasionally. And I ended up going like 12-6 or 12. I think it was 12 or 6 or 12-8. Like whatever the numbers were, came up to a 67% win rate to get me back up to like 2,500-ish from like 4,000. So I had one game where I'd played a Miracle Salesman on 1, and my plan was, okay, I guess I'm going to Power Chord synchronize this on 2 because I don't really have a 2-mana play. It was against a Rainbow Decay, and they went coin Dirty Rat and pulled out a Thirsty Drifter. Like, well, this is better. This is like they should just like when you get your license and then you drive on the wrong side of the road and you take your license to drive away. Like they should take away the Dirty Rats. If you coin it on 1, they should just take those out of your collection because you're not using them in a safe and responsible way. Like it's just I wish I could get in the head of someone. It's like, oh, I have a control deck. I'm gonna coin Dirty Rat on 1. Like what is your plan? What do you
I can understand a line of thought, which is like, the rest of my hand is pretty bad. That 2/2 is actually going to hit me a lot. If I can get this 2/6 down and it just pulls out a gift-wrapped whelp without the battle cry, I'm in good shape, right?
I mean, that's high risk, low reward, though. I mean,
it's pretty high reward.
I mean, you're gonna, you're probably getting like taking out like one. I guess you trade off a couple things maybe, but still.
I mean, you could trade off 3 things against a Zarimi Priest, not too hard that way.
The thinking of dirty ratting early against an aggro deck is that if you assume, 2/3 or more of their minions are pretty small.
Yeah, I guess.
But when there are really big hits too, that, obviously you don't expect them to be kept in the mulligan, but sometimes they're just there. Yeah, it is definitely
like
high
sometimes
risk,
you
high
just
reward.
hit an Amenthul and like,
Or in the old days, you hit Hydralodon and you're just dead.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, by the time that I was able to stop by the stream, it was doing very well, and I came in and chat and just kept like putting a play in, and then by the time the lag caught up and Wicked saw what I had said, he had done the exact same thing. So we were kind of mind melding on that pretty well.
So I guess I figured it out enough. So that was good. And then I ended up doing a co-op for like an hour with That's Admirable on Tuesday on Painlock. He just messaged me randomly like, hey, you want to co-op? Like, okay, sure. Had probably the longest and most intense 5-turn game of Hearthstone that I've ever been part of. Where we were just like dead on board for like a lot of the game. And then we got to turn 4. They had 8 power on board and we were at 9. And we just said, okay, I guess we're just going to put 3 Molten Giants on the board and 2 Projectionists and say go and hope that they don't have 1 point of damage because that's the only way we're winning this game. And they didn't. They had Zilliaxes. And I don't remember exactly what we did, but we were able to clear everything. I think we just had to trade because like we were literally at 1. We were going to die. We had like a Malefic Rook that we couldn't play. And some other stuff. And then I remember him yelling at me because I said it. We just have to hope they don't have Symphony. And he yelled at me for speaking that into the universe. And they did actually draw Symphony off the top, but they missed on all of the direct damage options and on the +6/+6. So
wow.
And then they just conceded and we're like, oh no, we're dead. And then they just looked at the 3 options for a while and then their portrait blew up like, oh, okay.
God,
I get the rush now. Like, I get it. But
what must they have been? Like,
draw 6, burn 6, draw a minion, toss 6 less?
Yeah.
Would have to be like exactly that.
There's not very many.
Yeah, it's hard to miss on all the damage, right? So yeah, it was something. And then the following game we played against a rogue who had we had gotten down a cult neophyte on going into their turn 5, so they proceeded to play Sonya and then spent 75 seconds playing and replaying coins. And luckily, we figured out what they were doing and just started clicking through all the animations because they were emoting after they were done playing all the coins. And I think they were like actively trying to get us to skip a turn. But once we figured out what was happening, we just clicked through the animations. And eventually it took us like a good 20 to 30 seconds into our turn before we got control again. But then we just did that and just hit them with the minions that we had on board. And that was the end of that. But it's just that was just like a pure YR Rogues moment. Like, I don't know. But, we had fun. I haven't really played too much myself. I played some Battlegrounds. I haven't played duos yet, but I played just kind of like on my own because I had like a clear 10 Murlocs or play 10 Murlocs quest that I needed to clear. And I certainly wasn't doing that on ladder. So I played some Battlegrounds. And it took me 2 games to find a Murlocs lobby. But then I was able to do that. So, but I haven't played too much standard. I'm looking forward to playing it some more this weekend. But I haven't been, I felt better risking other people's MMR with learning Painlock rather than risking my own. So,
well, I've been playing mostly Zarimi Priest. I did extremely well earlier in the week. Blasted into Legend. I had just missed out on 11x due to getting cocky at the end of last month. So I didn't have that extra bonus, but I just blasted through with Zarimi Priest. I had like a 75% win rate. And then
actual
the
75%
patch happened. And everyone was like, Zarimi Priest, we're going to target that. And so I've been readjusting. Also just been tired, had the kind of nights where my brain's like, what if instead of sleeping, we just think about everything anxiety provoking that we can possibly come up with in one night. So, and so then I was like, I need a more chill game. So I tried to get my Sims 4 working, and then I was like, oh, right, I haven't played this game in forever, and I have lots of mods. So then I spent like 2 hours updating all of my mods. And then you try to load the game, and it never quite, there's always at least one mod that's broken when you try to load the game, despite you having checked and updated everything. And there's a mod that tells you like which mod threw an exception, which is a lifesaver. And it told me that I have 300 files in my mods folder. But luckily it said, it's one of these 9 that's messing up your UI. So that doesn't take too long to get rid of. One time I was so nerdy that I could not narrow down which mod was causing the problem. So I collected the ones that were likely to be the problem. And then I did like a binary search. I was like, all right, I take out half. See if it's in this half. And then take out half of those. See if it's in this half. Because computer science teacher. At any rate, I'll talk more. So we are talking about Zarimi Priest in Decksplanations finally. And so I'll talk more about games there. I did have one game against a tentacle warrior this morning. I thought they were just a regular Bran warrior. And then they played a tentacle. And and then I was like, oh, okay. I played Amon Thule, and it offered me that rogue card, that rogue legendary that destroys a minion and all copies of it.
Oh, Flick Sky Shiv.
Yes, what a good card.
I'm like, that's the one rogue card that I actually enjoyed was Flick Sky Shiv.
I do like it a lot.
So they had done a good job clearing a lot of my stuff. So, but then what they did right after that was play, the thing that like gives them 4 tentacles in their hand, and they generated a bunch more tendrils. And so I just immediately nuked all of them. I had already squelched them. I should have unsquelched them just to see what they said after I nuked all of their tendrils, but they recognized that they still had Ignis, and so they still had some game left. But that was entertaining and surprising. It was not what I was thinking was going to come down, but that's probably the best use of that flick that I have ever had. So that was enjoyable.
This is when you have to have like the original Zyrella skin so you can have the such skill emote. When you do that.
And she's like, such skill? The most BM tone possible. Whoever the voice actress is for that clearly had a good time with it. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about Zarimi Priest. Also, thank you everyone for, I know that my audio specifically was a little choppy last week, so thank you for your patience on that. Hopefully should be fixed. So just needed to make sure that I restart my computer once in a while and that the RAM is not completely overloaded. Imagine. PSA, restart your computer every once in a while.
I mean, maybe just do it right now while you're listening, like unless you're listening on the computer, then don't do that. But yeah, well, we have we had some news this week, more news than I think we thought we were going to. So we should talk about that, I guess.
Gadgets and Gazette always gets the scoop.
All right, so there's the one big news item. We will get there. We're going to get everything else out of the way so that we know that we're going to spend some time talking about it. Yes, I have the economy bumper queued up. I'm not afraid to use it. But we do have some known issues that are still out there that you want to be aware of from the new patch. One of them is that the Mac desktop clients are unable to access the shop. So if you are trying to buy on a Mac desktop or a Mac in the Mac client, you can still buy things through Battle.net. You're just not going to be able to buy them from the in-game store in the Hearthstone client. You also theoretically could do that on your phone, but yeah, it's only affecting the Mac desktops. And there's also, if you are getting notifications from your antivirus software, that audio plugin fluxer.dll is madware is malware. It's the file is safe and you can go ahead and restore it, and they're working with antivirus providers to get that whitelisted. So just so you're aware on those things, there was another patch that fixed a few things. We will get there because there are other things going on. There was also a rules change that was added after the patch went live. So there were patch notes, and we talked about a lot of the things that were in the patch notes last week. But there was one thing that was added after the fact, this rules update. Cards that force spells to be cast, like duplication or recasting, now check for legality. Meaning, for example, you can no longer use cards like Conductivity to Altered Chord a stealth or elusive minion, or promotion a minion that isn't a Silverhand recruit. If the would-be target is not a legal target, that portion of the spell won't have any effect. So this was fairly confusing. There was a lot of discussion in the Discord about what this affected and what it didn't. Hat issued a clarification. It impacts 4 cards: Conductivity, Zentimo, Katori Lightblade, and Spirit of the Dragonhawk. So, and he says things like Execute, Promotion, Spotlight, etc. will now revalidate targeting. So what this meant before is that we'll take the example of like Conductivity, Execute. If there are 3 minions and the one in the middle is damaged and the 2 on the outside of it aren't, before you could Conductivity Execute the one in the middle and the other 2 on the outside would die. Now today, after this rules change, if you do that and you execute the one in the middle, only the one in the middle will die. And he specifies, will this change Yogg? No. Noggenfogger? No. Root of the Archmage? No. Literally anything else that casts random spells? No. He actually says nah, but I don't want to say nah.
So this specifically, it's just Conductivity, Zentimo, Katori Lightblade, Spirit of the Dragonhawk. It is only when the spells are being recast for the targeting to be rechecked. So
Dragonhawk is a hero power, but yeah, same difference.
So spells are hero powers, yeah.
Yeah, the spells are hero powers being redone, that it will check for target legality. Again. So that was something that we were a little confused about last week.
Yes. Yeah, so if we were confused, you might be confused, so we wanted to clear that up for you. And there were a number of portraits that were added to the store. So we got some skins, a number for gold. We got Eternal Medivh, Iron Hunter Rexar, which is another one of the mech ones, and Hatcher Gul'dan. Those are all available for 1,000 gold or $6.99 USD. We also got a new Pinocchio Blingtron bundle for Rogue, which is 1,000 runestones or $10 USD. And we got the most value that you're ever going to find in a hero portrait, which in a hero portrait bundle, which is Boulder Fist Ogre, Boulder Fist the Ogre, which is for, again, $15 USD or 1,500 runestones. It is a warrior skin. It is a Boulder Fist Ogre. I don't know how they did not slap a great value sticker on this, because they really should have. But you can't get that. And also the Ner'zhul diamond portrait was also added to the store as promised, so you can get that as well. I'm not sure if that's just Boulder Fist Ogre. So I'm not gonna go scroll through Ben's entire timeline to try to find how much Ner'zhul was, but that is available. You can go buy that. That's the first diamond portrait.
I believe it was 25, but I might be wrong about
Oh,
that.
maybe. Okay. Yeah, I guess they're maybe the legendary ones are even going to be more than that then. But that's, well, I don't know. We won't speculate.
Might have been 20.
Yeah. Hopefully somebody in chat will tell us how much it was, because I meant to look and I wasn't buying it anyway, because I'm not buying a shaman portrait. That's not Lady Vosh, because she says wicked a lot. So we had a couple of notes on duos. One thing from Celestlon that he points out, that if you cool up solo and you want to chat with your partner, you could try sending them a friend request from the recent players list at the start of the game, because after a couple of combats they'll scroll off the recent players list. So that's something, if you're one of those people who is queuing with randoms and duos, that's something, at least a way that you could try to chat with them. That may or may not be worth it. That's up to you. Gia also had a really good thread about the art of the duos cards, and what inspired them, that we'll have linked to the show notes. That's worth it. Obviously, describing artwork in audio form is not a particularly great great for podcasting content, but we'll have a link to the show notes and you can go check that out.
Yeah, there's some cute things about, what things are references to, some of which is obvious, and some of the references either I didn't know because they're from other parts of the world, or just wouldn't have thought that was a reference. One of the first ones, she says the iridescent sky blazer, which is a bird. She says, this bird was based off Ibang Adarna, an epic poem about a magical bird that I and nearly every Filipino kid had to study in school. If it poops on you, you turn to stone. Fortunately, the BG version just gives buffs.
Okay. And Edel has confirmed that Nerzul is $25. So same as the legendary portraits. So perhaps they're going to be changing the price of the legendary ones, or they're both going to be, that's going to be title only. Who knows? We'll figure that out. But that is not the reason that we have to play this.
Time is money, friend.
Quite literally on this one.
So if you were an astute listener of last week's episode, you will have noticed that we had about a 15-second segment on a throwaway line in the patch notes that was mentioning that quests were going to be adjusted, and in order to do something, and we had no details other than that one throwaway in the patch notes. So we just kind of said, that's a thing that's happening. We'll see if we notice. We noticed. we sure did notice, because they changed, and I'm sure, like most people, I would imagine you are hearing this and you know what happened, but in case you don't, you get all of your news from us, and we appreciate that. So what happened was that they increased the quest requirements by a whole lot. I have up on the screen on the stream, for those of you who are live, this is from my quest log, which is I had a play miniaturizer mini cards weekly quest, and I am stuck on 1 of 60, because that is what that got bumped up to. And now it went up to 2,700 XP from, I want to say 2,300 or 2,400. Like, they did increase the XP, and they said that they were going to be increasing the XP in addition to making them slightly harder to complete. That is not slightly harder to complete. That is significantly harder to complete. Ranked wins and battlegrounds / arena / tavern brawl wins went up from 5 to 15. I believe most of these, if not all of them, affected the weekly quests.
Yes, they were all weekly quest changes. Several of them went where it became 3 times harder to complete. So instead of 5 wins, 15 wins. And many of the other ones, amount of damage done to the hero. The spend 500 mana one went up just to 750. And the XP increase was about 20%. So as you might imagine, people were not thrilled to see things be 3 times harder for 20% more reward. Now, not to bury the lead on this, they have already partially walked this back in a very quick hotfix.
Yeah, but it also had kind of a first act of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the plans to destroy the Earth, or in the basement at Alpha Centauri kind of vibe to it, because like they did have this note in the patch notes, and it definitely seemed to take the community team off guard as well, because like a change like this normally would be preceded by a lot of preparation. It wouldn't just be coming out of nowhere, but this is something where all of a sudden everyone's quests were way harder, and like people were just opening up their quest logs like, what the hell? I mean, when you're seeing 15 rank wins, that's very obvious. And I guess we should talk about like, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of, fear, uncertainty, and doubt going on in general. Reddit immediately ignited. Twitter did as well. I think what's helpful context, and I'm not excusing anything here, because this was a clear mistake to do it this way and to do it this hard, but so that you could understand why they might want to do this. Like the primary metric for most free-to-play games is daily average users. So they measure how successful a game is, not necessarily by revenue, but by daily average users. You'll see this like whenever a new game comes out, they'll talk about how many million daily average users they have. The quests are there to drive player behavior. That's why they exist. If they just want to give us stuff for free, they could give us stuff for free. The reason that they're doing the quests is to get us to do things. They're getting us to try new modes. They're getting us to play the game, spend more time in the game, whatever it happens to be, in exchange for in-game currency in this game. So I don't know exactly what the conversations were behind the scenes, but my assumption based on what happened here is that someone was probably looking at the daily average user trends and seeing they probably spiked, I would guess, on Sundays and Mondays. Mondays when the quest would re-roll, and Sundays when people said, oh crap, I have to finish my weeklies, because they hadn't been doing them all week, and was probably lower throughout the week, because your weeklies you could generally finish in one day. Like I would almost always get through my ranked wins quest on stream, right? Like I would start up the stream, and I mean, I guess not always, because I have bad days, but I would stream on Mondays and I would get through my ranked quest, my ranked wins weekly quest on Monday. And so they probably thought, hey, let's make these take a little bit longer so people will play the game further in the week in order to finish them, and then we'll get the daily average user number to be a little bit more smoothed out and more representative. I don't know how we got to the numbers that we got to, because anyone could see that like playing 60 miniaturized cards is bananas, and even like 15, like unless your main mode is Battlegrounds, or the Tavern Brawl is incredibly fast, the play 15 Battleground win, not play 15 Battlegrounds, Arena, or Tavern Brawl quest is that's never ending, right? Like each game of Battlegrounds is like close to half an hour, and that's if you top 4, which you can't always do. Arena, you're having to put gold in order to get to that number, and you can't even do that in one run, no matter what. And then Tavern Brawl, sometimes those games are just never ending if it's like a randomonium or something like that. So to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, I was never getting there with 5 on the Battlegrounds Tavern Brawl or Arena one, right? So I always rerolled that one. I've definitely a reroll at 15, like no shot. Yeah.
Same
never at 15 is there going to be a week where I'm like, oh, I think I actually might be doing some Arena or some. I'm like, no. Similarly, for Battlegrounds players, I'm sure they always re-roll the standard one, right? And I think the standard one is kind of guaranteed that you're going to get one that is win 5 ranked.
Yeah.
And so they probably look at that and are like, well, we got to reroll that because we can't complete that in Battlegrounds. So I think they're, in addition to wanting to increase engagement throughout the week, I think there also was a desire to give players more reward, right? I think that shouldn't be discounted. I think it's naive to think there's any universe where they would just give players more rewards and not get a little something out of it themselves.
Yeah.
And for certain ones of these weekly quests, I would not notice and just get more XP and be like, cool, right? Because it's very likely that I'm going to certainly spend enough mana, deal enough damage, any of these generic things that just happen from playing the game. I think even the steep increase might be okay because they're things that are basically going to happen by playing the game normally, regardless of what you're playing. You're going to be dealing damage, you're going to be drawing cards, you're going to be spending mana. Any of those ones, fine, to some extent even destroying minions. But for the ones that are play certainly miniaturized cards, that's super tough if you're just not playing something that uses miniaturized cards. Battle cries, depending on what you're playing, could be more of a challenge. And I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, but there's a few things that get pretty specific, and certainly ones that do modes that you're not interested in that are just gonna feel impossible and have to be re-rolled. And I'm sure there are people out there that don't like re-rolling quests for whatever reason. And as an engaged player, certainly it doesn't feel for certain ones like a big increase, but there are, I'm sure, players who struggled to complete the weeklies before. And so, having them triple for what is not a commensurate increase in XP is pretty overwhelming. I'm sure some people would have been kind of annoyed, even if it was like triple XP, triple duration, which it was never going to be that either.
Yeah, I actually don't think it was the mismatch that was the issue. I think it was the significant increase in amount of work to do. I do want to make sure that before we get too far, we cover. So what they posted an update on the weekly quests, and they had a hotfix come out today. So the hotfix, they reduced use your hero power to 30 times. They had put it up to 40. 30 is obviously still higher than 20. Play battle cry cards now 75 times. Play mini cards now 32 times, which is still a lot, but less than 60. And the win games in Tavern Ball Arena or Battlegrounds is now 10. Win ranked Hearthstone games is now 10. Damage enemy heroes is still 400 and spend 750 mana. And Hat tweeted, to make sure this is clear, this is the first round of quest tuning we are doing, not the only round. We're going to monitor data, listen to your feedback, and work to rebuild your trust. We have more work to do and we know it. Myself and the rest of the team have all been paying close attention to your feedback on weeklies, and we know more of that will come in. Also, as a note, this hotfix was put together really fast, so you will not see the correct visual values in the client. That is known. So a side note on that. You may... So if you look at now, you're like, oh, they didn't change anything. So if you have like the 15 wins, it will complete when you get to 10. You should get your reward, but it might still be up there. And when you get to 15, it'll say like 150% complete, which is a little weird. They couldn't fix that in order to get that out this fast. And Hat says, I'm monitoring your feedback and I've talked to many of you about this. I expect to continue doing so. And thanks to all of you who have reached out. I've learned a lot from your conversations. So Hat, early coin concede to Hat, and I'll probably do that again when we get there, has really been dealing with a huge firestorm very graciously, very thoughtfully. And I've been seeing a lot of people, even people who are quite unhappy, really being appreciative of Hat just really giving the sense, and I think accurately giving the sense that the team is listening and help the team listen to the community. My own personal thought on the weekly quests. So it doesn't affect me that much because I already re-rolled, and because I already play that much. But I think it's a problem for a couple of reasons. Even at the current levels that they moved it down to, one is if you ever have a week where you can't play during the week, and so you only have the weekend, you need, like, especially with the new numbers, you like need a few hours to be able to dedicate to this. Yep. And not everyone has a few hours every week, but people really, a lot of gamers really feel strongly with any free-to-play game that they need to get all the things. And all the free things. They don't really feel like this is bonus reward for engaged players, which is kind of what Blizzard's statement said that they wanted to do with this increase. Right? They had said we wanted to reward our most engaged players for their commitment to the game. I don't think people see quests that way. They see it as a minimum requirement to engage with the game. And so if they're not able to meet that, I think that makes them feel bad and not want to play the game. And I've been seeing a lot of posts, and people are a little potentially hyperbolic when a change first happens. They get overly upset. I don't want to say overly upset because I think being upset about this is valid. And
like,
I think
this was like a lot of the upsetness. Like, I will be the first one to tell people to calm down. I think that a lot of the upsetness was justified in this case, given how out of whack these numbers were.
Yes, I actually absolutely agree with that. I think when people are upset, it's always valid. And in this case, I think it made a lot of sense. People were saying, I'm going to quit the game, or I know people who are going to quit the game because of this. And I think in some, it can be hard to tell, are they really, when the change just happened? But I think the change does have the potential to do that because people feel bad when they can't meet the thing. And also, so in psychology, I also teach psychology. If you're wondering, Magesa, what subject do you teach? You teach all the subjects. Yes, I teach all the subjects except for social, except for history, because I don't want to get into that. Within the current political climate, even in California. Anyway, in psychology classes, we talk about extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. So extrinsic motivation is when you have an outside reward that you're aiming for, and that's why you're doing the thing. And intrinsic motivation is when you're doing the thing because you want to, because you find it rewarding personally. And extrinsic motivation is often needed to get people started in things, needed if it's something that's just not very fun. But it also makes things feel like work. And so people in studies will enjoy a random task they're given in a lab more if they're not paid for it. And the reason is, if they're paid for it, they assume I did this for this reward and it was work. And if you aren't paid for it, you're like, well, I could have left this study at any time. Right? This is something that I enjoyed doing. So I think for games, having an extrinsic reward of, we want you to get into the game, we want you to form a habit of the game, that totally makes sense. Probably healthy for the game. It makes sense from a business perspective. But something where you feel like a large proportion of the time that you're playing is work to get to this thing that you feel like is the minimum standard you need to meet to engage with this game, then you feel worse about it, even if you were going to do it anyway. Again, I think it affects people who already played this much the least. And yeah, it's kind of nice to get the extra 20% XP. And I don't think it was malicious. I want to be clear on that. I do think there was some, because it's a company, they're thinking like a company, but I don't think it was like, how do we grab tons and tons of extra cash out of people? Like, I don't think they were totally lying or anything like that when they say we want to reward our most engaged players. I just personally think it's counterproductive, even with less tuning.
Or you could say, misguided, right? I think
it was a mistake.
I think it's easy to say we want to reward our most engaged players, but when the system is used the same way by players on a big range, right? Like you have to please all reactions, and they maybe thought like, well, it's at the start of the week, people will get to the end of their week and maybe they'll see that they in fact can complete them. But of course, that never happened because people freaked out so much that they wouldn't give it a chance to get to the end of the week and see how much they actually get, right? It very much depends on if you are the person who is playing all week versus you just look at the quests and try and do them in one sitting, right? Like, I try and, when I log in on Monday, I look at the weeklies and I'm like, what of these can I do? I always re-roll the Battlegrounds arena one. And any other ones that I'm just like, mini tries, that's going to take forever. Like, I'll try and re-roll those. And over the course of the week, you get a re-roll per day. Since I'm logging in every day, I have ample opportunity to re-roll the weeklies that are I'm like, yeah, that's not realistic for me. And then come Sunday, I'm like, I have a clean slate going into Monday most of the time. If I've been engaged, which, like, round expansion launch, I have been engaged. And so, I'm sure a lot of the time this would just be more XP for me. I am that engaged player, right? But yeah, if you, as you said, were working all week and you didn't get a chance to log in until the weekend, and now you're staring down these tripled weeklies, and you're like, oh gosh, maybe I want to play a different game.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's also that it's all or nothing, right? Like, we were talking right before the show about Magic Arena, how Magic Arena has the quest implemented, and they have a weekly thing that gives you a little bit every win up to your first 15 wins for the day and for the week, right?
And I really like that one.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of other problems with Magic Arena's economy, but that's the one that's the one good part about it. But then that means that, like, if you only especially because it's wins and not played games, right? Like, if you have a bad week, you only get to win 6, but you played a lot and you just, had a 30% win rate or whatever, you'd still get something. And here it's like, if you don't do the whole thing, then it's not lost effort because that effort will carry over to the next week, but you're losing out on another quest, right? And so that's where I think a lot of the problem with the way that that's structured is. And there's also, I think that in general, there is some portion of the populace who is just looking for any tea leaf that says that this game is about to go down a cliff. Right? Like, I posted yesterday, after they posted the update on the weekly quest, I said, and I believe it, that this is the quickest that they could have possibly responded, given that it's a big corporation and they had a response within a day and a half. That's like lightning speed for any large corporation, which is always like turning around a battleship. And they acknowledged what the problem was, and they said that they were going to make it right. And I had, people saying, well, this was just they planned it this way all along because this was just a trial balloon and they were going to see how much pushback they got. And it's like,
no one wants pushback, period.
Right. They just launched duos. That's what they want people to be talking about. And instead, there were people talking about duos. But instead, what are we spending our time talking about most far on this show, most of all?
And I will encourage everyone to keep Hanlon's Razor in mind. I think everyone knows Occam's Razor, which is the simple solution is probably the right one. Hanlon's Razor is never blame on malice what can be explained by stupidity. And it's just like somebody made it. I'm shocked that this made it through into the patch the way that it is, because, like, you have to imagine that multiple people had to touch it, right? Like, somebody came up with the numbers and then somebody signed off on them. And that got through all the way into live without somebody saying, hey, 15 wins for 20%. You're tripling the number of wins for 20% more XP. Are you nuts? Right? But that's how sometimes those things just kind of get by. And I don't think that this is necessarily a harbinger of anything else, like, especially because, this is Blizzard. All eyes are on the economy all the time anyway. First it was Activision, now it's Microsoft. Like, people are looking for signs that things are about to go, in the wrong direction, especially the layoffs a couple months ago didn't help either, I should add. I legitimately don't think that is. I think this was a miscommunication, and somebody really not being in tune with how the player base was going to respond. And because like clearly whoever put this in didn't think that it was a big deal because they didn't give the community team a heads up that they needed to sell this ahead of time, and that there needed to be like some sort of a post beside like a throwaway line at the bottom of the patch notes, a patch that had like about 15 pages worth of Battlegrounds cards in it. Right.
I really think that they looked at it and they said, oh, X% of players are finishing their weekly quests on Monday and Tuesday or Sunday.
Yeah.
And thought, well, if they're finishing it Monday through Thursday, that's no big deal. But there's clearly a lot of other things going on that make that feel like a big deal. And to Blizzard's credit, I think a lot of people, and I still hope that they continue to tweak the numbers some more. And so people are not necessarily happy with where it is right now. But again, this is just a first step. They had, like less than a day to get this in the pipeline. They did acknowledge this was a mistake, right? Like they gave their reasons, but they did acknowledge this was a mistake. And if anything, overall, the economy has gotten better. There's been controversy over some of the cosmetics, but things like the catch-up packs, for example, the new player experience, the returning player experience have gotten a lot better. So I wouldn't call this a harbinger or a death knell or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if you're saying like what is sort of the baseline cost of being able to play competitive decks, I think that is lower than it used to be. But like so many games, they have on the other side implemented a ton of ways for people to spend a lot of money if they so choose in cosmetics, which in some respects is meant to offset the additional stuff like catch-up packs and everything else, because now they do have players buying diamond skins, diamond cards, signatures, all the stuff, right? I'm one of those players, right? It supplements the stuff that helps people catch up. But I think a piece of this is just like a bit of a lack of recognition that not all of these quests are equal in terms of their difficulty, that like you can't use the same ratio increase to all of them for the reasons I already talked about, right? Certain ones are just happening for playing the game, spending mana, taking turns, destroying minions, dealing damage. All those things just happen regardless of how you choose to play. But the ones that are more specific, where you are more intentional, I think people were sometimes re-rolling those before, right? And so to then
I certainly was,
those, right? Like, you look at the miniaturize one. If I'm playing my hand buff paladin, which has the 2 plushies and Tarim, which is about as many in a competitive deck as you can run of miniaturized cards, because none of neutrals are really viable. And I also have Geppetto. So that is, let's say I play both plushies and Tarim, they're minis, and I get those minis back from Geppetto. That is 6 in a game, max.
Yeah.
And we're going to 60? That's really tough. So there has to be a little bit more intentionality in terms of raising the completion difficulty with the quests, because they're just on different levels in terms of completability in the first place. And so you can't just say we're gonna do, times X amount for all of them.
Yeah. Well, also the fact that it was the times X was 3, right? Like they
Yeah, some of them were double and some triple.
Yeah. Like they triple, like at least like the ranked win, like the wins ones, they tripled those. Like I don't know how anybody has not heard of the analogy of how you boil a frog at this point. But they tried to throw a frog into a pot of the hottest boiling water that exists, and then were surprised when the frog jumped out. Right? Like that's the thing, is that like even if you doubled them and you had like a 25 to 30%, like I mean that's what they ended up doing with this patch, and people are still not happy, but they're not happy because
they just weren't going to be happy.
they're already upset, right? Like this isn't going to make them feel better. But like if you'd gone up to 10, right? And then but you'd also like, the problem is you're never going to double the XP, right? Like, so that's kind of the problem, is that you're adding much more work than you are adding reward, and you're expecting people to be happy about that. And I think that's kind of where I think a lot of the people have issues with it, and they're still going to be unhappy with these changes because it is still double for the ranked wins. And for a lot of these, I mean, the mini one, they backed down to 32, which is still feels like a lot, but it's a hell of a lot better than 60.
Still re-rolling it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I still don't want to do that one ever.
Like, it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. But I mean, even 10 ranked wins is still like, if you have a bad week, that could take you quite a while. And if it was play 15 games, I think like that would feel a little bit better. Like if they changed it from win 5 ranked games to play 15 ranked games, that would be, then at least you could know how long that was going to take, more or less, right? It's the fact that the win on that quest in particular, and if you're talking about Battlegrounds, even if Battlegrounds is your main mode, right? Your top 4 are in 15 games.
It's so
right.
So, and I know why they do it, right?
Yeah.
They do it because they don't want people to queue up and concede 15 consecutive games.
They already have protection for that, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think the play is a big thing, because when it's 5 games, even if you're having a bad week, you're not as likely to just spend forever staring. You know, I have had days where I'm just not winning things. I've played like 8 games and I've gotten like, haven't even gotten half of my ranked wins for the week yet. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And if that's 15 and you're just not having a good week, it's going to make you feel even worse about not having a good week. So, but I do think, you know, this is something, all of this feedback is being relayed back to the team. And so I'm glad they'll continue to look at this.
Yeah. And I think that most people, from what I understand, like have been generally not directing this feedback, or feedback is fine to direct. Anger and hatred is not. This is just the general reminder that the developers are people. They are not the ones who made this change anyway. Like the people who you are seeing on Twitter and on Reddit are not the people who are responsible for making this change. So please be kind to them. Be extra kind to them, especially Hat. This is not the way that Hat's planned on spending time in Hades this week.
And it's just the demo, right? It's not out, is it?
It's the technical test, but I'm sure he would much rather be spending time in that Hades than the Hades that he's spending time in right now.
I did see a Halion video pop up with the new, and I'm like, well, I gotta watch this.
Yeah.
Well, I think we should take this opportunity to switch over to something far more exciting, which is Masters Tour that we've finally had, and we won't have another one for a little bit. So
It's the grand tournament.
So we had Masters Tour Spring, I think it was Spring, over the weekend. And that was, we talked about the players participating last week, but it was Habugabu, WeQ, Fury Hunter. I forget what we determined the translation of this name was, but I think it was Kimchi Slap was what they used on broadcast, which, you know, delightful. Prithinka, Hemlock, Tobika, Molstar, Gyu, Gamer RVG, Rekvem, Bunny Hopper, Yarla, Dmitry Kazov, and Insane. So a few lesser-known players, including my teammate Molstar, and then others people may be quite familiar with. But it was you know, a pretty stacked tournament. There were a lot of the same brings as often happens, not necessarily in terms of lineups, but certain popular decks were very popular. Most popular deck though was Zarimi Priest, so timely with our Decksplanations for this week. 13 of the 16 players brought it, and despite some kind of soft targets on it, it performed really well. It beat out, some of the warriors that were supposed to be good against it. Still managed to take games against them, and it completely obliterated its supposed counter in Pain Warlock, which is pretty funny because Pain Warlock is supposed to be good in that matchup. I even got a couple of games off Nature Shaman, so Zarimi Priest also just wasn't banned, right? It only drew one ban in 36 matchups, but it had a very good win rate. So I think 66% win rate. Second most popular deck was Nature Shaman, and a lot of people were bringing Speaker Stompers. So, I think it's one of those things where it can be a good bring in the sense that it just wins, but it also, if people are bringing it, you can just shut it down with things like Speaker Stomper, or to some extent Cult Neophyte. And so it it was banned a little bit, but not a ton. Mostly people just had Speaker Stompers in their decks, and that dealt with it pretty well. I think 44% win rate, because it either got warriored or it got stomped.
I mean, the Stompers didn't seem bad, all things considered. There were definitely some points where they were able to play that and they were relevant, even though they weren't necessarily against a Nature Shaman per se.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, against control deck, Speaker Stomper is also quite good, right? So if you're bringing Pain Lock and you're well, I need the Shaman to not be able to cast things when I'm at 10 life, it was very good there. It also was good if you were keeping a warrior off Sanitize or something. So definitely, and the fact that it's tradable, I think just makes it far more playable in certain other things. The Speaker Stompers did not help Zarimi Priest as much, right? They still went 2-6 into the Nature Shamans, but for something like a Pain Lock, which was drawing a decent number of cards and has fracking to look for it kind of stuff, and, isn't paying mana for its threats, then, it performed a bit better. And then sort of in third place in terms of popularity was finally a Demon Hunter. They've separated out here for these stats. Otherwise, Demon Hunter would be a little higher, but they've separated the Naga version versus the straight version. So there were 9 lineups with the Naga version, and as opposed to 5 with just the straight Shopper DH. But even though the Naga version was kind of being lauded as the better one, it didn't do great. Now, I guess that's because people who let it through were okay with it, but it still only went 2-3 versus Warriors. It lost to the Mirror, right? It lost to the straight Shopper THs, and it lost to the Control Shaman player.
Yeah, I was not super impressed watching it. I had loved the idea of the deck in theory, and I know that people were having some success with it before the Masters Tour, but watching it during the Masters Tour, it just was too awkward. It was too late to get the 4-mana sharpshooter down.
Yeah, well, the problem is you didn't want the sharpshooter stuff first ever, and you basically needed to curve in the appropriate way, right? Where if you hit the curve, it can feel unstoppable, where you're going weapon into Shopper, and by the time you're done playing Shoppers, now you've gotten to the 7-mana part of the game. Maybe you get to play the Titan, discount your Sharpshooter and stuff by 2, and you're off to the races. That really hard to beat. That doesn't happen all the time. And so we saw a lot of the same, where's my Sharpshooter situations, or
you don't have that many Naga to go with your Sharpshooter. You can't discount it.
Right, so if you drew some of the Nagas in the early game, and that was your early pressure, now, you don't have too many left in the deck to actually draw. It just seemed pretty clunky. One of those things where it's okay, there's the best case scenario, but what's it doing in not those cases? And it seemed like the just straight Shopper DH was more consistent on that front, because it's it's just built to be an aggro deck, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're giving up the early game for the mid game, and you don't necessarily want the mid game. A lot of times you kind of want the game to be over before then. So it's got a little bit more resiliency, the sharpshooter version, but also you're giving up a lot of the explosiveness, and it needs setup, right? So like you need the Wayward Sages to go off in order to really get it to go. Sometimes you don't get those, and then like there were a couple of games where we saw like people had 2 sharpshooters in an empty deck, and 2 sharpshooters in hand in an empty deck. It's like, well, that doesn't do much for you. Like, I mean, you still get to play out your hand, but like if you've drawn your whole deck, then that kind of defeats the purpose. And sometimes it just seems like, like it seemed, I think there's a tendency, and I'm not even saying that it's necessarily wrong, but with something like this, you get into a spot where you might overthink it and try to get a little bit too fancy. And then you end up shooting yourself in the foot by trying to like third level everyone, when just the level 1 play sometimes is just good enough.
Yeah. And now, all that being said, it was still banned 63% of the time. It was banned a lot. So I think people were just prepared to ban Demon Hunter, and it, at that point, didn't matter as much which kind it was necessarily. Maybe they were a little more scared of this one because it's supposed to perform better against warriors, even though it went 2-3, right? But, I think a lot of people are just like, well, they have this and they have Nature Shaman. I've got the Stompers for Nature Shaman, and looking at the other 2 decks, not really things they want to ban, so they banned the Demon Hunter, which fine. The 4th most popular deck was a surprise, and that was the Pain Warlock, which I think people were just looking at ladder, they're like, huh? But it was used in half of the lineups, and it, even though it's supposed to win, it went 0-3 versus Zarimi Priest, but it actually performed pretty well into some of the control lineups just because it's fast. And when you've got Speaker Stompers for Nature Shaman, also good at preventing people from removing your stuff. And the deck tends to kill you all at once, right? Like it gets a bunch of Molten Giants down or horrors or whatever, and maybe they go over the top with something like the Symphony at the end, but it largely is just like mega big board, kill you. Honestly, surprisingly similar to the Shuffle Rogues. So
yeah, except faster and a lot more consistent.
Yes, yeah, for sure. You're not reliant on Gatekeeper in the same way.
Yeah, because you also you don't just have the Molten Giants, you also have the Imprisoned Horrors.
Mm-hmm.
So you have like multiple ways to get big things down, which means that you get big things down more earlier and more consistently without having, because like you have to spend 3 mana on guess like Gatekeeper, where you've already got Molten Giants down a lot of time, or at least Imprisoned Horrors down on 3 with the Pain Lock.
Although this doesn't happen often, but there was one hilarious game, I forget who was involved, where the Pain Warlock player just like played a lot of the stuff to hurt themselves and then didn't find any of the payoffs. They're sitting on like, double location with 2 Blood Treants and Flame Imps, other junk, right? They're at 10 life, and then they just get killed because they didn't have any of the horrors, no Molten Giants. And I'm not even sure they had like the 5/6 that hits you for 5. Yeah, that would have been a decent thing to location. When you don't hit
the payoffs, the deck looks very, very silly.
It's very stop hitting yourself, especially if you're playing aggro.
I feel like that game ended with a Spirit Bomb self-lethal. It's just like what happened.
Still not the saddest game in the
I mean, at least they went out honorably, as opposed to Habu Gabu, whose tournament ended because he drew 2 plagues before he got to start his turn.
And like the turn before, he'd drawn a Frost Plague out of like a pretty full deck. Yeah.
Sometimes.
And it was just Helya, unlucky. I think, too. It wasn't even like down with the ship or a weapon. It was just like, Helya just kept screwing him over and over again.
Yeah. I definitely have had those feels on ladder somewhat recently. Yeah, it's a bummer. But next on the list, there was Odin Warrior. That was in 7 of 16 lineups, which did not do great against Zarimi Priest. And went like even versus Sif Mage and Shopper DH. So it ended up looking not very good.
Well, except in the one lineup where it mattered, which is the one that won.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that was what WeQ did a full OTK against I think that was the Rainbow DK in the last game of the match, where he was frozen, played Reno and why am I
Quillbore, Reno,
yeah.
and then
I think he had goggles in there. I think he had safety goggles. And yeah, he had Reno, and I think and he verse rift. He had one mana left over for the verse rift with that he'd already played a verse rift earlier to set it up for the finale.
I mean, that's why it's there, right? That's why the Quillbores are there. It's basically the Reno, this may not have happened to everyone on ladder, but one of the ways you deal with getting Quartzite crushered every turn is you just figure out a way to get lethal on the turn that you play Reno to unfreeze yourself. And so if you go Quillbore, certainly if you can play the goggles for free, and then the Reno gives you another 5 armor, and then the Riff, because of how it works with it replays the other one, they're separate ticks, right? So you get extra value out of the Quillbore, giving you 2 armor per cast. You
plus additional attack too.
30 people. Yeah, exactly. I think it ends up being plus 12 just from that one card, or is that right? Something like that.
It's two twice, right? Plus,
and then 2 attack, and then 2 twice and 2 attack again. Yeah.
12.
So I was sad to see my teammate get eliminated by WeQ. It came down to just a rough roll for Molestar. WeQ got a stealth on his scrap bot and was able to put that on the doubling attack Ziliax. And since it remained stealthed against a mage, Blizzard, and I think there was another magnetic to increase it to 3 health. The situation was like Molten Rune put it from 5/7 to 5/1, and then it got magnetized up to 3 health from the 2 scrap bots, one of which was stealth. So it didn't get cleared by Blizzard, and Molestar was forced into a position where he basically had to just play Khadgar and hope, because it already played, I believe, 1 Void Scripture and 2 Primordial Runes, right? I mean, that's part of how he got the Blizzard in the first place. And Khadgar just didn't give him the role he needed to clear.
And there were a lot of roles in Khadgar that he could have gotten. Like Arcane Missiles would have done it. Like Flame Strike Blizzard.
Lucky on the Arcane Missiles.
Yeah, but I mean, at least he would have, had a chance, right? But like, and Flame Strike or Fire or Blizzard would have done it. Also, or even like, I don't know if a mirror image would have helped.
No,
at that point, I think there was enough stuff on board that it wouldn't have made a difference. But like, just a Frostbolt to the face was not what the doctor ordered in that scenario.
Yeah, it was a tough beat, right? Like, not that, of course, everyone who wins a Masters Tour has good luck on their side, right? In one way or another. And had he made it through, people would be talking about the luck he had, but it was just unfortunate that the stealth lined up in the way that it did, because otherwise he actually had a pretty good hand and draw and discovers to actually win against the Shopper DH. And if not for that Ziliax, he would have got there. And maybe he would have won the whole thing. We don't know. But I think he felt okay that WeQ took the took the overall W. If you're going to lose to someone, lose to the champion.
Yeah. And WeQ is someone who's been like top of the leaderboard month after month for quite a long time, and gotten into lots of high level tournaments. Sometimes has struggled in the tournaments, and he's someone who didn't have a lot of experience in the old system, where you would just have a lot of tournaments to play and a lot of experience with that different mode of play. So it's really cool to see him coming into his own on this part as well. Clearly a very talented player. So, and we do have an America's champion.
Yeah.
Finally.
We'll take Canada.
Yeah.
For sure.
Canada's basically the US anyway, right? Apologies to everyone who's Canadian listening to this. I do know that's not true.
After watching the Fallout series, which I did quite enjoy, and replaying the intro to the Fallout 1 game, where there's a little thing that says, "Our boys keep the peace in newly annexed Canada." It's a little tough. But yeah, for purposes of America's needing a win in Hearthstone esports, we absolutely take Canada, all of Latin America, any of that. But in terms of games to watch, well, first let me thank Oncrad HS or Maxime Bavin, who has been posting these stats since this is no longer Wicked's domain in terms of Masters Tour stats. It's very useful summaries and stuff. That's basically what I was reading this from. But in terms of a match where if you like, I just want one, good series to watch, Bunny Hopper versus Hemlock. In particular, the final game. And Bunny did this, I feel like, a couple of times in the tournament. He had an Odin warrior as opposed to Highlander warrior, and up against Hemlock's Zarimi Priest. And he just made these incredible plays where Hemlock had, at one point, triple Whelp Wrangler out, along with like a Ziliax. So it was just getting all of these, taunt dragons to hand. And Bunny was just like, well, I'm not dead if I just gain armor, and you can't play minions. So
specifically Zarimi. I think Zarimi was specifically what he was concerned about. And well, if you're board locked and I don't clear anything and I just take the hits, you can't Zarimi and you can't get the damage through.
Right. Well, get damage through, but not lethal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he, got reduced to very low life, but kept armoring out until he finally was able to get the card draw and answers for this board. And then he knows, he's watched some cards burn, but he knows that the majority of Hemlock's hand is just 1-2 dragons, right? Which get cleared up very nicely by just, an Aftershocks or a Bladestorm or something. So very well played from Bunny. And, classic warrior, you go down to 9 health and then you win the game with, upwards of 40 armor. So
yeah. The classic mistake is assuming that the game was almost won just because your control opponent is at 9 health. Or your Painlock opponent is at 9 health, as I've been learning today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a very good game. And if you only have time to check one out, I would for sure take a look at that one. But we've spent plenty of time on tournaments. It's time we actually talked about things from the side of the Zarimi Priest and how you can do better than me. Although, in fairness, I was playing Donkey's List with the Astrals.
All right. Well, so we are talking finally about Zarimi Priest. Now, I know that I have been doing little mini lessons on this every week for a few weeks now, but it is now just in time for people to start targeting Zarimi Priest. We're going to give you a little bit more extended tips about the deck. So at this point, I think, everyone's fairly familiar with what is Zarimi Priest, what is the list. The list that Wicked and I both independently landed on is the same as the last Vicious Syndicate list, except for instead of that flex spot of the Starlight Whelps, we have Gyreworms, which Habu Gabu brought in the Masters Tour. I had seen this from World 8 earlier. Some people have been playing the Gyreworms with Ignis. I've actually been playing the Gyreworms just on their own. I did try a little bit of Ignis today. We'll talk about some of the other card choices, but the Gyreworms, even by themselves, are very powerful. They give you a little bit of healing, a little bit of over-the-top damage or board swing. When we were seeing a lot of DH before the patch, was great for that. But even in a relatively haven't seen a Demon Hunter meta, you can copy them and get a lot of damaged face. This is something that, this deck had been, I think, before this change, and also if you're running Leroy, which Wicked and I have been running Leroy and the Gyreworms. This is a deck where it's like, well, if you keep it clear, then they don't have any over-the-top damage, but with the Gyreworms and with Leroy, you do have some over-the-top damage besides just Zarimi. Just Zarimi, of course.
And like, Ziliax exists, right? So, like, sometimes you need to be able to get damage over a lifesteal taunt that you wouldn't otherwise. And also, they do kill imprisoned horrors, which is the next best thing to killing a 6/5. So that can help also if you're seeing a fair amount of pain lock.
It can help against a big taunt from a wheel lock. It's probably not going to get rid of it by itself, but it will allow you to trade it off without trading off your entire board, for example. So I found them quite useful. And you do have to think about when you're going to weave in the forge for it. So are you going to need it on 4, in which case you have to forge earlier, or can you wait until 6? If you want to bounce it, it needs to already be forged, stuff like that.
Well, if you're gonna synchronize it, if you're gonna Celestial Projectionist, it doesn't matter because you have to play it that turn.
That's true. Yes, if you Celestial Projectionist, then it doesn't matter. That is definitely an important point to remember. And not get functional fixedness on. Some of the other. So that Leroy spot, some people have been trying Ignis there. People have tried Hearth there, was common in the Masters Tour. I personally don't believe in that as much in this deck as I do in, say, Virus Rogue. But if you love Hearth, then go for it. And some people have cut the Dreamboats for Habu Gabu. It was a Panner and a Razor Scale. World 8 posted in our Discord a list with, I don't think that he made this, I think he found it, but it has Rawden, Ignis, and Creation Protocol.
I know No Hands was trying a mid-range list with Creation Protocol. Rawden is entertaining. I don't know if that's really it.
I didn't quite win, but to be fair, I was having a little bit of a rough day with wins regardless. Today specifically did really well yesterday and days before. If you've copied your drifters specifically, then it feels great because like you just have this endless line of taunts. And you probably have some little 1-2 taunts. It's like an endless line of taunts is what I was finding it was useful for, but it means that the deck goes later. And in general, what is this deck trying to do? It's I had a note here called "What do we want to have happen?" and I just put a screenshot of a game I had where I had 17 power on board on turn 3. And an active Zarimi in hand. Actually, I don't think she's active, but I have Zarimi in hand. So this deck, it doesn't have to have 17 power on board on turn 3, but it's a very explosive deck. It's a tempo deck. It's an aggro deck. It's not an OTK deck. Sometimes you can, in certain matchups, you do need to try to play Zarimi with lethal or close to lethal. But as I've said in previous weeks, most of the time, like you're just trying to get as much pressure as possible. You're balancing the biggest, earliest boards with refill, like with any aggro deck. And I do want to remind people, aggro decks, they still have a lot of decision making. It's compressed, right? Those early, because you're hoping the game is not that many turns, those early turns, which 1-drop do you play first? Stuff like that can matter a lot. Do you forge? Do you not forge? When do you play your Crimson Clergy, for example? All of that matters a lot. You can also, don't concede too early with this deck, because sometimes, especially if you have a chance of getting like Clergy Funnel Cake, don't keep the Funnel Cake unless you have Clergy, by the way. But if you can sometimes have these insane recovery turns, which we like saw in the Masters Tour. I think it was Habu Gabu. It might have been someone else on Priest. Was just like had played out his entire board, including like tempoing a Celestial Projectionist, which was actually the right call in that particular case. Got everything cleared, and then Crimson Clergy, Funnel Cakes, back to the races. those turns can be incredible. But in general, you're just going for what is the most pressure that I can put on that's going to be awkward for my opponent. If you know that they just forged, they're a warrior, and they just forged something on 2, don't set up a beautiful Bellowing Flames turn for them.
Yeah. Or if you're going into turn 5, leave them with 1 armor. I learned that one the hard way. Like, because I just, hit face because I'm not an aggro player. That's what aggro players are supposed to do. I'm going to fake it till I make it. And I cleared all their armor and they went safety goggles, sanitize, and I'd seen them forged. And then I said, I deserved everything I just got. So, do be aware of like what they can do if they safety goggles. If you're within range of a safety goggle sanitize, if you've seen them forge, maybe leave them at 1 armor for that turn until you can, reload. But yeah, I think Sottle said this a couple times during the Masters Tour, and I think that's what unlocked it for me, is just like the way you play this deck is figure out what's going to put the most stats on board and then do that. And more often than not, that's the correct play, which means that if you need to tempo out a projectionist, you're not getting any value out of it. If that's better, if that's your only turn 2 play, then you do it. Right? Because it's still going to be better having the 3/2 than hero power passing. This is not Control Priest. You do not want a hero power pass onto.
Yeah, this is not, even though you can have these big burst turns, you're trying to put on consistent pressure and have refill. If I see a warrior forge on 2, I'm going to try to have just enough out that they, like, I'm still going to put something out so that they Bellowing Flames it if they have it. Then I can be pretty sure whether they had that or sanitized based on whether they played on 3. And then I know what in my hand I'm refilling with right after that. So you want to kind of try to anticipate what is the removal. Or if you're playing against warrior, can I get 4 health on things? Maybe I'm going to prioritize getting my Kyurgen out first so that my things have a little bit more health so that the Aftershocks doesn't clear everything. There can be decision making on like which dragon do I play? So like, do I play the Kyurgen first? Right? Or do I play the
the gift wrap whelp.
Gift wrap whelp.
Yeah.
The other ones are happy whelp. The one that looks happy is the gift wrap whelp. Well, they all look happy. So you do want to make sure when you're looking at the gift wrap whelp, not order it such that then it doesn't get the extra +1/+1 unless like it's already been buffed by a different one. It doesn't matter. Or it's your only turn 1 play, just play it. Especially if they're not like a DK. Like if they don't have a ping, this is your turn 1 play, just play the darn thing. But assuming you have multiple dragons in your hand, like you don't want to play the gift wrap whelp last. But often I will play like 1 gift wrap whelp, then a Kyurgen, then everything else, and hope the Kyurgen got a buff if it's like turn 2. Other people argue for, well, you should try to get as many buffs onto Zarimi as possible because then that's more burst damage when you play Zarimi, but buffs on other things are more stats now. So
it depends on how close you are to Zarimi also. If it's turn 4, maybe try to get the stats on Zarimi. If it's turn 1, just get the stats on board.
Exactly. So that can be where it matters in that situation. Something like Synchronize, again, like you can use it just for an extra couple health and then another overstated minion right after. So you don't have to save your Synchronizes necessarily for a Drifter, especially if you're not close to that and you don't have something else good to play right now. Just Synchronize your Miracle Salesman. Now it's a 3/4 and you have another 3/4. That's
an extra draw too.
And an extra draw. Like that is fine. It doesn't always have to be your perfect synchronized drifter, free drifter thing, although that, if you're close to that in hand, then that might change the calculus.
And you generally want to tempo before you draw. That because I think when you play Scale Replica is going to be a matter of your success with this deck. If you are playing Scale Replica on 2 and you have anything else to do, you're probably doing it wrong. There are times when you want to do that, and generally when you want to be playing Scale Replicas, you need to figure out like how to weave that 2 mana in such that you're still developing tempo, but you're getting to 5 dragons in time for Zarimi, because Scale Replica will always draw you the Zarimi if you don't already have it, at least in these lists, because we're not running anything that's more expensive. So Scale Replica will get you one dragon and a Zarimi. So you want to do that when it makes sense, but you want to be doing that after you've already developed tempo. Because it's more important to get the bodies on board than to draw for another turn, because if you don't have the tempo, you can't continue to pressure, which means that your opponent will start to get the board back. And once you lose the board with this deck, it's not impossible to get it back, but it's very difficult. If you're you can remove 2 minions at most with Amanthul, and like you have things like the Gyroworms in this list, you have a Leroy in the worst possible case scenario to get rid of a minion, but you're not removing a wide board. So if you start to fall significantly behind on board, you will not get it back in time to be able to do anything with it.
Really, the main thing that can get you back is Zarimi herself, and then you're not using her to attack. You're using her just to get the board back, which don't be afraid to do that if you need to. It is one of your only ways to do that. But ideally, you're not in that situation. What I'll do, I will play a Scale Replica when it's not my highest tempo, only if I know that like that will allow me to Zarimi next turn. So maybe I can play up. It's turn 5. I've played 3 dragons. I play another dragon, Scale Replica, 5th dragon, and then I can play Zarimi the next turn. Or next turn I can play the 5th dragon for 1 mana and then Zarimi. So you do want to be keeping in mind, it's not as much like Virus Rogue, where this is the only thing that you're ever doing is figuring out what turn you're getting the Ziliax down, but you're still thinking, especially if you haven't had a drought of dragons, you're thinking like, what turn am I getting Zarimi down? And just put them low, or just re-get the board, or unless you're playing directly into like a Reno or something, I don't tend to hold Zarimi for lethal. Sometimes even like if they have just Reno'd you, then you play Zarimi, then you do get your board. One tiny thing that I had not realized, but we found out, I think in your stream, Wicked, that someone had played an Observer of Myths.
Oh yeah,
and
So
those secrets don't go away.
Observer of Myths says until the start of your next turn, which means that if you Zarimi and they have the secrets out, those secrets will still be out on your next turn because they have not started a turn. So be aware of that. The other little interaction that comes up more often than this is if you have Ziliax and Pip in your hand at the same time. If you play the Pip when the Ziliax is at 2 mana, the Pip will discount the Ziliax to 1 before the battle cry goes off, and then you will get an extra copy of Ziliax in your hand that way. Edel and I found that out while we were co-streaming the Masters Tour, and we both said in unison, that works that way, and and apparently it does. And Magesa's like, yeah, of course. Doesn't everybody know this? So,
well, the first time that I had a Ziliax and a Pip in my hand, I had gone, for science, let's find out which way it works. The other side to this is that you could easily make a mistake where you have a Pip and your Ziliax is currently 1 mana. You play the Pip, it goes to 0. You do not get a copy.
Right.
So
yeah.
Be aware. It has to be 2 mana while it's in your hand, such that when you play the Pip, it goes to 1 for you to get a copy of the Ziliax. But that can be very, very powerful when that works out. So, Amanthul, great card. Don't expect it to. It's not a board clear. It is not Sargeras, but it can really help. Sometimes you can Zarimi and then Amanthul to clear their taunts on the extra turn. You can, if you stick an Amanthul, you can copy a Leroy. Don't be afraid also. I've even in a pinch copied a dragon to get to 5 dragons to get my Zarimi down. That's not usually what you're wanting to do it for, but don't sleep on the Amanthul copy. You can copy a Drifter, is generally going to be a lot better than a random 6-drop lifesteal. So It's just a powerful card. Don't do what I did, though, which is play Magatha. I mean, playing Magatha is good. But if you play Magatha and it gave them a power word synchronize, and you know they have that in your hand, don't play your Amonthul into it. I did that against a mage. They ended up with more Amonthuls than me because then they like reverbed it. And then they like got a rewind from somewhere to get another power word synchronized. And I'm like, this is all my fault. This is all my fault. Don't be too afraid to play Magatha as well. I for tempo reasons, I don't play her until I need the draw, generally.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit like you can't be too afraid to click the button if you're playing Prison of Yogg. Even though sometimes it goes wrong for you. Like if you need the draw, play Magatha. Sometimes
you play it and you draw 3 spells, you give them to your opponent and you concede, and you weren't winning that game anyway. So, that's like, you want to play it, things sometimes go wrong, but like that's risk reward, right? And just make sure you're going to have room in your hand for the cards if you do.
Yeah, make sure you have room in your hand. Sometimes I'll trade a Snake Oil first or something if I have a lot of spells in my deck. Otherwise, I won't if I don't trade that after. I did one time burn cards of my opponents because I gave them Snake Oils. But don't count on that as your strategy unless your deck is almost empty, I suppose. So this is check when you're playing your dragons, check which one got buffed by your gift wrap whelps. If you have a bunch of identical little 1/2 taunts, see if one of them is 2/3, play that one or copy that one with Pip. Just a little thing, but it can be easy to play a little too fast. And with the funnel cake, make sure that you're paying attention to if a minion is damaged, how much it's damaged, so that you can tell whether you get that mana back before you just play the funnel cake. And play the funnel cake whenever it gives you an advantage, even if it's not on a clergy. So, if it just lets you get an extra couple 1-drops down on 2, great. Or a Wrangler. I'll often coin Wrangler on 1. That's almost always, most of the time it's like, save your coin. Don't just coin things out on 1. If I have a Whelp Wrangler, I just coin it on 1 most of the time, especially because then I play another 1-drop and the 1/2 taunt on 2. But if you have a funnel cake, you play the 1/2 taunt, you funnel cake, you play a 2-drop or 2 more 1-drops. It's great. If you had a clergy in there, also extra great. So don't be afraid to use the funnel cakes just to get some value. Again, unless you know you have clergy, or the only thing that will possibly save you is a big clergy funnel cake turn.
Yeah, and remember that the Dreamboats will draw you cards if you have clergy on board also, assuming that they're going to overheal. That's something that is easy to forget, and you don't often have a full hand, but you could. There are times when you can just end up with a lot of stuff in your hand, and that could overdraw you, or just oh, hey, I get a card off of this, so you want to, prioritize that. Not necessarily planning to use that card that turn, because you're probably going to have used up most of your mana to get as full of a board as you can for the Dreamboat, but it's important to remember that, this is also going to draw me a card. So there's, because you can have a bunch of different things. You might have 2 1-drops you're thinking about playing alongside the Dreamboat. And if you have the clergy, that's going to get you a card. The other one might do something else for you. It's just worth keeping that in mind.
Yeah. Dreamboat is really powerful with a lot of 1-drops. You might prioritize getting a little bit more of the extra 1/2 taunts, really trying to protect your Whelp Wrangler, which is a good idea in general, but so that then you can have just a bunch of little 1-drops and then toss a Dreamboat. And then often I'll projectionist a Dreamboat if I already have a board, because then that next Dreamboat is even +2/+2 bigger than the first one was. So that can be really powerful. And you also want to, if you need to trade, because again, you don't really want to lose board in this deck while you're going face most of the time because you want to kill them. You also, sometimes you have just a lot of little taunts and therefore you can ignore their board because you have a lot of little taunts. But do pay attention to whether they're going to trade you off. You might do a little bit of trading. If you're going to do a little bit of trading, you might want to do that before you play the Dreamboat or the Funnel Cake, especially if it's only doing 2 damage to your minions. then you can sort of freely heal them back up with those. So you have to think about whether you need that overheal or not and stuff like that. But if you're going to be playing a funnel cake or a dreamboat, and you're going to be trading, which comes up decently often actually, think about your ordering for that. That can be kind of a common little mistake. There's lots of little counting. When is my drifter going to be 0? When am I going to have 5 dragons for Zarimi? Stuff like that. In terms of how much damage am I doing, obviously with an aggro deck, ideally, you're always counting, like how many turns away am I from lethal, especially if they're not a warrior or something like that. But if that's too many things to keep track of, the most important thing is just how do I maximize my stats from my mana? Like if you're only going to think about one thing, how do I maximize my stats from my mana?
Yeah. And just kind of play around like common board clears, like stagger your health against a warrior so you don't get blown out by a blade storm. You know, think about leaving them at 1 armor if you're worried about goggle sanitize. Like, you know, you want to have high health across the board against a demon hunter, not a demon hunter, against a death knight so that they can't thread you easily. And obviously having a high health taunt so that they can't trade off one of their minions into one of yours and then get the threads to go off. That sort of thing. Like, you don't have to play around every removal, and you generally can't play against around every removal, but like the little things you can optimize in terms of like which minions you're using to trade. Do you want to have one minion at a lower health to play around Bladestorm? Do you want to have everything at high health to play around threads? Those types of things. Like, don't go nuts, right? Like, it's more important to just get tempo, and sometimes you get blown out and you go next. But generally, like, if you can keep like one thing in mind that's going to screw you and try to play around that a little bit, then you'll be in a better position.
Yeah, especially against, if you're playing against a nature shaman, you just got to go.
Yeah, you're not beating Alter Quartz and Baking Soda. Well, they don't even run Baking Soda Volcano and Nature Shaman, but
yeah, that's something. But if you're playing a more controlling deck, then that is definitely something that you want to think about. And if you're playing against a more aggressive deck, like a hunter, you can just completely outboard, like just overwhelm their board with. And I will sometimes like trade off their little 1/1s and then just know that and then heal my stuff up and then be like, all right, before they have a chance to saddle up or something like that. If you are facing a pain lock, you need to get as much pressure early because then they're going to spike. And then gyro worms are valuable in that. Mulligan, we haven't mentioned. Mostly it's a pretty easy mulligan to describe. Whelp Wrangler and your 1-drops. But not funnel cake.
Yeah, well, I want to specifically call out some real traps in this deck. Because if you look at keep rate on some of these cards, people are keeping Crimson Clergy 86% of the time. They're keeping Scale Replica 62% of the time.
No.
And both of those are things you basically shouldn't be keeping. Funnel Cake has a high mulligan win rate at 60%, but a low keep rate at 37%. And that's people who realize that you basically only keep it if you have the clergy, right? So a lot of people are keeping clergy just thinking, oh, it's a 1-drop, it draws cards, I should be playing this, right? Or I should be keeping it. But it's your least powerful 1-drop in a vacuum because you don't want to hero power on 2.
Yeah, you keep it if you have a funnel cake, or maybe, especially if you're on the coin, you're like, coin, clergy, dreamboat is a pretty good play. Or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, maybe. But mostly it's salesman, your 1-drop dragons, your Whelp Wrangler. Because that's just such a good start. You really want to have that to begin with.
Who is keeping Starlight Whelp?
Apparently 34.4% of people.
They want to hit their dragons. What can I tell you?
I have not had that much trouble hitting dragons most of the time. You do sometimes have to count to say, like, every once in a while you don't draw a bunch of them, or you didn't get a Whelp Wrangler, so you might have to spend a copy on a dragon when you wouldn't have otherwise. But mostly I haven't had a lot of trouble getting Zarimi active.
You don't feel bad, or at least not that bad, using Projectionist or Power Chord Synchronize on a Whelp, like a gift wrapped Whelp?
Yeah, those can really
Yeah, it's
add
fine.
up, actually. Yeah, when they keep adding the +1s to your hand. Or you just have a bunch of ships Chirurgeons. Don't
Mhm.
underestimate that card. If it's not going to get cleared instantly, then you play a bunch of little taunts, and now they have like 3-4 health.
Yeah.
That can be really annoying. And anyone who's played against Nature Shaman and those little darn 0/1 frogs knows that little taunts are really annoying. So yeah, overall, I've really enjoyed this deck. I do think so. There's been calls about, is this deck going to get nerfed? Possibly, but I think it's quite counterable, and we're already seeing some of that. If you are trying this deck out, and you think you might enjoy it, it does have a little bit of a learning curve. So keep that in mind
sure.
while you're trying it out. And I find it, obviously I'm biased, it's like exactly my type of deck, but I find it really fun. There's a lot of decision making, and you can have these incredible turns. But if you are just really frustrated facing this deck, you can absolutely counter it. The Pain Lock, even though it didn't work that well in the Masters Tour, I have found has done pretty well against me. And most decks, I'd say, definitely have some game against me, ways to win against it, and Nature Shaman's just really tough. So if it does get nerfed, it could get nerfed. I think there's lots of different ways that you could attack it. But I still felt comfortable having this be, I don't think it's going to be like tier S, no one can touch it. Just a solid deck. And it's the type of deck that doesn't tend to get super overplayed. Like, it's not a Ramp Druid. It's not a Miracle Rogue. So hopefully that also keeps the nerf hammer from hitting it too hard.
Yeah. And if you really do want to counter it, Pain Warlock is it is a 40% win rate. Where Zarimi Priest is 40% into Pain Warlock. So that, and then if you really want to counter it, Flood Paladin is Zarimi Priest into Flood Paladin is their 33% win rate. So if you really hate this deck, go play Paladin.
So that's why I've been seeing those.
Yeah.
People really hate this deck.
Yeah, Paladin seems to be bad into the control decks and like murders almost everything else.
That tracks.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that'll do it. Any final thoughts?
Nope. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's a good deck. It took me a while, but it is a good deck, and it will take you some losses, but you will figure it out eventually. Or you'll sign up for coaching with Magesa, one or the other.
Or maybe it'll just click. If you enjoyed the other decks that I talk about on this podcast, you'll like this one.
Well, that's going to be it for our show. We have many folks we'd like to thank. Check out our thanks section on the website at Concede.com, where you can also find our contact info, our show notes, and our Patreon information. You can monetarily support our show at patreon.com/CoinConcede. Join us every week live by following us on Twitch at twitch.coinconcede.com, join our community chats in our Discord at discord.coinconcede.com, and write into our email at coinconcede@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at CoinConcede, as well as like, share, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/CoinConcede. If you'd like some CC swag, head on over to our shop at shop.coinconcede.com. Big thanks to our producers, Number Theory, Crash, Beef Squatch, David P., Walu, Jeremy T., Bottle Caps, Grumpy Monk, The Burger Club, Kirk Regan, Forgiven One, Grizzly Bear, and Tyler Knife. And CoinConcede to Scoob-D for the sub during the show. CoinConcedes from each of you.
Well, I'm going to coin concede to Swebe because she announced today she was named a broadcast her ambassador for the Thousand Dreams Fund, that's a really, really cool thing. That's a Thousand Dream Fund is to fuel the dreams of talented women in need. It says that mission comes to life in the various programs we run and provide critical investments in form of funding, mentorship, or experiential learning opportunities that lead to employment. So it's a really cool organization, and I mean, Sway is an amazing human being, so I'm really happy for her that she's getting to do that, and that sounds like a really kind of important thing to use, her stream to kind of help improve the lives of others, which is really cool. So really congratulations to her.
Yeah. Well, I had mentioned Hat, but Coin Concede to Hat for really being extremely engaged, extremely thoughtful and fair, and listening over the past few days. Coin Concede to Week U for his win on the Masters Tour, and to everyone else who played. I had a great time co-oping with Edel, and so also thank you, Edel, for co-oping. That was super fun. We did that a lot on Friday. The Brian Brain joined our Discord yesterday to say that they had gotten Legend for the first time with the Overheal Priest that I was talking about back in February. So very glad that worked out for you. Congratulations. Yeah.
What about you, Edel? Anyone?
Well, I'm going to Coin Concede to Ray, because he keeps posting updates, and they're tough.
They're not good.
They're not good. He's got some pretty serious surgery coming up. And, I, as always, just really hope he gets through.
The trend has been that he's gotten through all of them so far.
Yeah.
So he just, statistically, he's guaranteed to get through this one also. That's how statistics work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'll just choose to believe that. But yeah, I hope that I hope that he gets through this and that he's able to continue to drink Dunkin' Donuts coffee after he gets through this.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for us for this week. So until next time, keep calm and forge your gyre worms. And if you see us on ladder, Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
Coin Concede.
All life must end. I yield for now.
I concede.
Well fought. I concede.
You win this one.
The victory is yours.
You have bested him.
I give up.
You win this one, friend. You win this time. I choose death.